You ever felt like God gave you a promise and then life completely moved in the opposite direction? Not rebellion, not disobedience, just silence. You prayed, you believed, you obeyed, but instead of open doors, there were hospital rooms, caregiving seasons, delays, hidden years. And somewhere in the middle of all of that, you quietly wondered, God, what happened to the vision? This episode is for people who have ever carried a promise they could not explain and walked through seasons that made absolutely no sense. Because what happens when God fulfills a promise, but not in the way you imagined? What if the mission field you dreamed about doesn't require a plane ticket? What if God can take a hidden season and turn it into prep for nations you never expected to reach? Welcome, my friends. This is WSKY SkyRock Talk Radio, the place for perseverance, passion, purpose, struggles and breakthroughs, friendships and new beginnings, the place that changes the way we live.
We want to welcome listeners joining us from around the world, across North America, South America, Europe, Africa, Asia, and the Caribbean. Wherever you are listening from, thank you for being part of the WSKY SkyRock Talk Radio community.
Welcome back, my friends. On this episode, we sat down with author, teacher, and minister Jeanie Olinger for one of the most honest conversations we've had this season. A conversation about hidden seasons, unexpected fulfillment, ministry through suffering, and discovering that sometimes God fulfills promises in ways we never saw coming. Well, welcome, Jeanie.
Thank you so much. It's good to be back with you.
Last time we spoke was season 3, episode 4, and we talked about your son, Chris, and his accident. That whole episode, if anybody wants to go back, that's season 3, episode 4. The whole episode was about his wreck and what was going on and what was happening. The title was, It Is Well With My Soul. This episode is going to be all about what came out of that situation. Talk about a setback that was really a setup for a successful story. A fire, basically, and then a phoenix comes out of this fire. So before we talk about books and Pakistan and translations and any other things that's happening right now, take us back to the beginning. When did you first realize there was something inside of you that wanted to reach beyond where you were?
I would say it was probably when I was about 15. I knew that there was something bigger, something I needed to do. I also know my family heritage. I'm a 13th generation minister.
Wow.
So I was aware of my heritage too. So I knew there was no escaping no matter what. So I grew up with an understanding of, you're in this family, it's in your blood, it's just going to happen. And then when I was about 15, I began to really feel the dealings of the Lord, and I had a hunger for the Word, wanted to know what it said for myself. And I began to study without any aids and just learn the Word. I just fell in love with the Word. And then it's evolved from there, of course.
Oh. What did that dream look like back in your mind?
Early on, I don't know that I had too much of a dream. I knew it would be ministry. I began to do devotions at the Christian club at school. I did some different things with various youth groups. I was involved with sharing so much initially, and so I knew it was just a part of my spiritual DNA. But I didn't really get the worldwide vision until I was in my early 20s, although about the time I was 18 is where 19, I guess, I really felt the call to ministry. Even though I knew my family history, when I was about 19, I was like, oh, I'm called to ministry. It's not just something not just handing the baton to me. I began to feel that call into ministry. But initially, I didn't know what that might look like.
Take us back to that point there, all the way up to the accident with Chris.
Okay. I'll just start with it. When I was about 20, I'm going to say 24, I started meeting with a group of friends. They were all quite a bit older than me. We began studying, and we were just hungry for the Word. That I just carried that over from my youth. I just carried that over. I just wanted to learn the Word. I wanted to be able to explain it. I wanted to be able to apply it and work through it and learn it so well. So we had begun studying, and a lady came and gave a word of, I guess it was word of prophecy, word of wisdom, word of knowledge. And she said, she did this a lot. We were learning about the gifts and how the Holy Spirit moves. And she gave me a word that said she saw me going to the nations. That was not new to me. I felt like I would go to the nations, but I didn't necessarily have a picture yet. And I said, what do you mean I'm going to the nations? And she said, you're going to the nations in the air. And I laughed and I said, well, I'm in an airplane, right? And she's like, no, there's no airplane. She said, I can't explain what I'm seeing, what God's showing me, but I see you going to the nations in the air. So it didn't make sense. In the early 80s, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have computers in our homes. We didn't have cell phones. It didn't make sense, but I knew I had the call to the nations. So I began aligning myself with, global perspective, with ministries that had a global perspective, that had the nations at their heart, that wanted to go, wanted to minister, had missions, were missions minded. And so I aligned myself with ministers. I always had a passport on hand because I had a lady who said, hey, you better have a passport because if I want to go somewhere and I want you to go with me, I don't want to wait for you to get a passport. You're going to have to get a passport. So I always had a passport. I always had luggage ready. I mean, I was ready. I was ready to go. But it just never happened.
And then,
and then in 2008, I had moved to Chicago, and I had gotten rid of everything. And my aunt and uncle wanted me to go to South Africa with them to help in their Bible college. So I was going to go 6 months there, 6 months here to raise money, and then 6 months back over there. It'd be 6 months here, 6 months there for the unforeseeable future. And I was so excited because I'm like, oh, finally, I have waited, and now I'm in my 40s. This is awesome, though, and I'm going, and I was working 3 jobs. They were itinerating for their next trip, and people were helping to give. They had helped raise some money, and I was so excited because it was finally going to happen. I mean, I was living in the clouds in my mind and my heart because finally it was coming to pass. It was going to work perfect from Chicago because I was staying with people. I could stay with them while I was there and then go to Africa and then still have a place when I came back. And I was like, wow, I thought that was the setup. And then in November of 2008, my son had a near fatal accident and he suffered a lot of injuries, but the most significant, of course, was the brain injury. It was a very severe traumatic brain injury that he suffered in that wreck. And immediately, it was just a few days into that, my uncle called and said, do not worry about the missions trip, don't worry about South Africa. And that was a devastating call, even though I appreciated not having the pressure, because I'm like, how am I going to get this done by January? And Chris is in the hospital. I couldn't see how any of it could happen. And it went downhill from there, honestly.
Did you ever feel unqualified?
Oh, I still don't feel qualified.
Yeah.
I still don't, even though I'm watching what God's doing is amazing to me. But even in all the processes, I didn't feel qualified. And then when it wasn't going to happen, I felt like I had messed something up. Maybe I had missed God somewhere. Maybe God changed his mind. I knew that wasn't true, but you're just kind of in this shocked state of, I don't even know what to think now.
Did you ever feel like, forgotten, or that the vision was over?
Yeah, well, I can't say if I felt the vision was over. I think it's kind of like, I've likened it to Abraham when he laid Isaac on that altar. He didn't know. The scriptures tells us, that he said, well, God is able to raise him again because I know my promise is in that seed. I know what God told me, and my promise is in this seed. So if he's told me to lay it on the altar and get rid of it, basically, he's going to raise it back up because this is the seed. This is the promise. And so I had some moments like that where I'm like, I really prayed through it a lot. This was probably about a year after I even got my son home. I had to come back and get a home established, somewhere to bring him from therapy. It was a long story in there. And then I just started going, I guess it's over. It's not, I can't see it happening from here. So I had some deep, dark talks with God, and he's so patient. And I was very raw, honest, and real with him. And I was like, look, God, I can't see this, but I don't think this lady made that up. And I think you said this, but I can't see it from here. So I'm going to give it back to you. I'm going to set it on the shelf. I'm not throwing it away. But because it doesn't make sense and what my life looks like now, it makes absolutely zero sense unless you're going to heal Chris and maybe we're going to go together, or worst case, my God forbid, but if he was to die, then I don't know. I can't think like that. So I put it on the shelf and said, that's your baby, God. I still say that a lot, by the way. But I'm like, that's your baby, God, and I can't see how you're going to do that, but I still believe you're going to do it. So I'm just going to set it aside, and I'm not even going to think about it. And so that's how I kind of handled that deep despair, that dark night of the soul. When the vision's gone, then I couldn't even see how God could possibly bring anything ministry-wise out of what I was going through.
One of the things that I'm hearing from you is that there was a promise, but it didn't unfold in that straight line that you thought it was going to unfold as. And so when I started off this podcast, I said a conversation about hidden seasons. So there was like this hidden season. So my next question would be, what did those hidden years or hidden seasons produce inside of you during that time?
I would say it started, a lot of it was the process of grief. And I think we don't talk about grief enough in Christendom today. I think it's something we pass over. We don't understand it. We expect people to just get up, go on, come on. That was a loss. Suck it up. Come on, buttercup. Let's go. And there was a lot of grief. I worked through a lot of grief first. I mean, I had lost my son in an essence. I lost my life in an essence. I had lost ministry from what I could see. I had lost families, friends, I'm in a cave. I've likened it to the cave. And in that season, it was what Oswald Chambers calls the dark night of the soul. And working through that, I call it life's crucible. When it crushes you and life is crushing in and you don't know what to do. And at first there's a lot of anger. What are you up to, God? This doesn't make sense. I thought we had a deal. It's kind of the thought you have there. I thought we had a deal. Well, I was going to go do this, and now it's all gone, and I don't know what you want from me now because I thought that's what we were going to do. And so there was a lot of grief. And then I realized one day I was watching a sermon, actually, and the lady was talking about Martha, Mary, and Lazarus, and she talked about Martha being disappointed in Jesus. And I went, that's what I'm feeling. I'm disappointed in God. And I broke down, and I'm not a crier, but I broke down in my living room floor, and I began to cry. And I was like, I'm disappointed you weren't there. I'm disappointed that you let this happen. And I just got brutally honest with God and dumped it out. And at that point, I was like, I can be disappointed in him and still trust him. I can be disappointed in the outcome and still believe what he said, but I can't see it. And I had to redefine my faith. I had to go back. I bought a brand new Bible, And I said, I'm going to read it with new eyes, because the worst thing possible in my life has happened. The worst thing I could even imagine has happened. And so I've got to read the Bible with raw eyes, with raw emotions. And that brought me into, the cave became a secret place. What I thought was a tomb became the womb and the birthplace of the ministry.
I think there's a lot of people listening right now that could relate to everything you're saying, that they've had a promise, something has happened, now they're in this womb of, what are you doing, God? Where are you?
Yes.
And through all of this, it seems like there's like a new understanding taking place. So how did all of this that was happening reshape your understanding of the ministry?
Well, it took me outside the church, and I'm not blasting the church. I love the church that we have. I'm not blasting, but it took me outside the religious thinking, because it's that religious thinking that says you have to act this way, you have to smile, you can't grieve. I realized how religious I had been, and I thought I wasn't religious. I really did not think of myself as quote, quote, religious. I'm free. I'm, God and I, we're cool, and so it took me outside of religion, and I began to read scriptures and see that in Psalms, they were so real with God, and that wasn't always allowed in religious circles. And I was like, whoa, this is very different. And I looked at Psalm 13, where David cries out and goes, are you looking the other way, God? How long am I going to have this anguish in my heart and you're not answering me? But then he also turned it around and says, but I will still trust you. And that was that pivotal moment in that deep, dark night of the soul, when you go, I can't see what you promised. I can't see what you're doing with this. I can't see my hand in front of my face because life is dark, but I trust you. And that was the pivotal moment when you decide, I'm going to trust God even when it doesn't make sense. And it drove me into an intimacy with God that I didn't even imagine was possible.
Now, one of the things we talked about in season 3, episode 4 was somewhere in the middle of all of the responsibility with Chris and the uncertainty of this ministry, you started writing. And where did that come from? Was writing something that you had planned to do, or did it become an outlet God used during that season?
Both. I began writing when I was a teenager, but I didn't necessarily know that's what I was doing. I wrote a lot of poetry back then. And then over the years, I had written some newsletters and some little things. And so it was in the back of my mind that I wanted to be a writer someday. And so when Chris was in the nursing home there in Louisiana, actually, and I was staying with him, I look back and see God's grace in everything. I thought, I can't waste this time. I was reading James with my new eyes. And I thought, wow, this would make an excellent Bible study. And I started having these questions come up in my mind. So I actually wrote the Bible study for James sitting in the nursing home, looking at my son, lifeless, in a hospital bed. And I wrote that one and a couple of small ones. And I printed it. I printed them there and used a little hand binder, a little comb binder to bind it. I think I had about 4 little books, but I remember James was one of the very first ones. And then I didn't do much because there was a lot between getting him from Louisiana to Oklahoma, about a year in there, and moving and different things. And then I began to write. I just started writing. My friend asked me to do a leadership conference with her leaders in her church by way of Skype. She lived in Indiana. I said, okay. So I wrote The Making of a Leader and worked through it with her leadership and kind of developed it as we went. And that's one of the biggest books we've done in Pakistan. Has blown my mind. So I just started writing, it kind of just happened. I didn't really plan it. And I thought I could do 1 John. I did 1 John for a specific Bible study. And next thing I know, I've got, I think, 15 books that I've written, if you count poetry books that I've published. So it's like, where does all this come from? So it just kind of evolved over time.
Was writing like a survival during that season?
Actually, in some ways, yes, as far as my Bible study goes. But when I was in the deep, dark part of the season, I stopped writing in my journal and everything. I think I couldn't process some of the emotions. And so I could process the word. And I was letting the word process me. And so I would begin to write what I was seeing in the word, but I couldn't write what I was feeling in my heart sometimes. And now I'm back to that's all balanced out now after 17 years. But it was definitely a way I could get my thoughts together about his word, about what he was saying, and kind of my redefined faith, seeing it so differently than what I had seen before.
One of the things you had mentioned before in the earlier episode was the printer on the freezer. There was like a story you were talking about. Remember that story?
I had a printer. This would have been my first book I ever published. It was a book of poetry called Dove's Fire. I actually called it Dove's Fire and Psalmist Songbook, and I stuck with Dove's Fire and ended up naming my ministry Dove's Fire. And I had a printer, and I had an old school chest type freezer. This would have been about 87 or 88 in the 1900s, way back then.
Oh, yeah.
And it had a roll of paper that was in the printer, and it was quite the chore to print two-sided because you didn't want to waste paper, right? So you had to print it both sides, but to be able to feed it in one way and get a poem on one side, and then turn it over and feed it the right way to get a poem right side up on the other side, and then I would bind those all together with that old that hand comb binder that I still have today. I use it occasionally, but that's where really the printing started. That was the first book I technically ever published, was that first poetry book.
You've become a self-publisher. You have written a leadership manual you just talked about, a James study guide, a 1 John study guide, the gifts of the Spirit. What it seems like is that God was building something before visibility arrived. And so
that's a really good way to say it, yes.
So I guess my next question would be, when did the vision start looking bigger than the original vision that you were carrying?
The original vision was going to the nation in the air, which made no sense, right? And then after I laid it on the altar, I just didn't worry about it. But I picked up a couple of jobs. One of my first jobs was, it took a while for it to get into my head, but one of my first jobs, I had to work online because I couldn't go to work. I was taking care of my son. And so one of my first jobs was a teaching school in the Philippines. And I was teaching English as a second language, which worked really well because by trade I'm a teacher and English is my native language, and we had to do it online. And then we had a teachers meeting once a week, and they were believers. So she said, hey, after our teachers meeting, why don't you lead us in a Bible study? I'm like, oh, wow, that's really cool. Okay. So we started this little Bible study in the Philippines. I'm not catching on, though, remember, because I put it away and said, I'm not going to make it happen. I can't make it happen. God, you'll have to. So I wasn't connecting the dot yet. So I thought, that's cool. Then I started with another school. He was based in China. So I started having some students in China. I had a lot of students in Russia. I had students in South America. Some of my favorites were one of my Russian students. I saw a Christmas tree behind him on his screen, and I said, I didn't know you were allowed to have a Christmas tree. Forgive me for asking, because I wouldn't bring up God or Christianity, because these are communist countries, and I didn't want to break any rules. But they would invariably bring it up. But I did ask him about the Christmas tree because I was so shocked. And he said, this is the first year that we can have Christmas trees. But I'm sad because I don't have any Christian traditions. I said, no, you get to make your own. This is awesome. And so, but I began ministering to different kids, different students. Most of them were adults. I met Christians in China. I met Christians in Russia. I even got to sing worship music in the public school in China. They said, we know you sing. Will you please sing if we're really good in class? And I'm like, I'm terrified. I'm like, no, I'm not singing in China. No. I said, I only know church music. I only know praise and worship. They're like, oh, please, we'll be really good, please. I'm like, okay. So every Saturday night for me and Sunday morning for them, every Saturday night when we finished our lesson, I would sing a worship song for them because they wanted to hear me sing, and that's all I knew. And so I started putting pins and I got a world map. I thought, this is kind of cool, but I'm still not connecting the dots. I got a world map, and I thought, this is really cool. I started putting pins in all of these countries, and somewhere in that process, I met Javed in Pakistan, and I taught in an orphanage. I taught for him, and I taught in another conference for him. We used Skype back then. I'm putting a pin in Pakistan, have no idea what God's fixing to just explode, right? And I've got pins in Canada. I've got pins in the U.S. I've got pins in Switzerland. I've got pins in Egypt. I got pins in South America, Brazil specifically. And one day I was sitting at my desk and I leaned back and I saw the pins across that world map. And I went, wow, I've been around the world. And that vision came back in that moment. And I went, through the air. I went around the world through the air. And I collapsed into just a pile of nothing at the realization that God had done his vision, but it had brought that vision to pass, even though it did not look anything like I thought it was going to look. And that was just the beginning, actually, of what he was going to do.
What I love about this is you had no idea. You had no idea that those materials would eventually travel around the world. You had no idea that just writing those books, you were still walking in that calling. You had no idea how important that nursing home season would become to the story that God was writing. I mean, that's what's so amazing about this, is that one day you stepped back, you realized that your words were reaching nations. And then you said, oh my goodness, God has fulfilled the promise and I didn't even recognize the path.
No, I didn't.
So many of us fall in that. So many of us have a setback that is really a setup, but we don't recognize it while we're going through it. But God is fulfilling a promise. It just didn't look like what we expected.
No, nothing looks nothing like I expected.
Nothing.
But he sure fulfilled it. And I mean, that was 10 years ago. It's gone so much further than I could have even imagined or tried to make happen from there even.
If someone would have walked in that nursing home and told you God is going to use technology, translations, Zoom calls, Skype, and these books you're writing to carry your ministry into nations, you wouldn't have believed him.
No, I would not. I would have said, okay, I'd have been polite, but I basically would have said, whatever. Because it was dead to me, in that little, especially year and a half or so, especially, it was just dead to me. I let it be dead to me because I knew God had to do it. I could not make anything happen, which was actually the perfect place to be in.
What I love is God's methods are just unexpected.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, somehow God had you singing worship music in public schools in China through Skype. Through the air. Those kids was begging you. God was using those children, saying, hey, please, please, please. And
I know, it was crazy.
Do you think sometimes that we miss what God is doing because we expect fulfillment to look a certain way?
Oh, absolutely. If you think about, even in scriptures, the disciples And especially the Pharisees, they thought Jesus was going to set up a natural throne and take the throne. The disciples nearly missed him coming and being them understanding that he was the Messiah. The Pharisees definitely did because they chose to, but they almost missed it because they thought he was going to come a certain way. And he said, I'm going to set up my throne, but it's going to be a spiritual throne. They didn't understand that part. There was a gap there in their understanding. And so, they thought it was going to come a certain way and it didn't. But isn't that what got Abraham and Sarah into a pinch of their own, right? Because they kept saying, God's going to give us a child, but he hasn't done it yet. So let's just do it ourselves. And I think a lot of times when we step out over into the comfortable place where we can just do it ourselves is where we get ourselves in a bind. And so God really protected me from that in a sense, because there's no telling where I might have gone and got myself, the pickle I might have got myself in if I hadn't had to stop, if life hadn't put the brakes on.
Basically, you felt like life was interrupting this dream, this vision that you were having, but really God was taking you through these hidden seasons. And going back to Abraham and Sarah, she laughed. And
yes.
So I can only imagine how you sometimes probably step back and laugh at the creativity of God, of what he's done in your life.
Yes, I do. I was actually thinking of something that had happened. It's been several years ago now, and I had met up with a group over in Arkansas, close to Arkansas, and I was aligning myself with a ministry, but it didn't make sense because she has a global ministry. And a lady actually said, she goes, this doesn't make sense. She goes, anybody who works with her in ministry goes to the nations. And I don't know how God's going to do that with you and Chris, but there's no way you're not going to the nations if you're going to work with her. And I remember her saying that, and I just kind of brushed it off like, whatever, because I'm like, I don't have to go. But I did know that was true. Anybody that aligned with that ministry, I still work with her some today also. And there's instances like that I just learned to just brush off. I can't care about that because I can't see from this spot how God is going to do it. But that is actually the safest place to be when God's about to do something with you. Because if we can do it ourselves, we can mess it up ourselves. And there was no way to mess it up because he kept surprising me with stuff, because I had to give up the picture that I had in my mind of how he was going to do it.
There are people, Jeanie, right now that are listening. They feel stuck. You can only imagine. They feel stuck between a promise and the fulfillment. As someone that has gone through what you've gone through, what would you say to someone in those hidden seasons right now?
I would say just sit back and trust God. That's easy to say. It's not that hard to do. When you know he told you something, whatever that promise is, whatever that gifting he's given you, whatever calling it is not easy to sit back. That's the hardest part, because you want to make sure you please him. You want to make sure you're doing what he said, because you don't want to get before him in the end and go, you didn't do what I said. There's that fear. So I would say let that fear go and just give it back to him and say, I know this is a transition, but I can't see where I'm going. I want to follow your lead. And if it doesn't look anything like I thought, it's okay. Just show me what you want me to do. And until I know what you want me to do, I will just sit here and wait. And we know that when we wait on him, it's when he renews our strength. Isaiah 30:15 says that in the quiet waiting is our confidence and our strength. And to be able to sit confidently and say, I have no idea how you're going to do it, but I know you're going to do it, God. I'm just your servant. I will wait for you. There's so much trust in that. And if you look at the Psalms, so many times when David's pouring out his heart, he goes right into, but I will trust you. But you've been my rock. But you are still my hiding place. And pour it out to God. And it's okay to be angry with God. He's not going to strike you dead, or he didn't me, so we'll say that. But I became gut level honest with God. I would tell him when I was frustrated. I would say, oh, this is so frustrating because I thought this, but now this or that. And I'm like, this doesn't make sense. And I remember one time even saying, I'm not even going to pray anymore. I'm just not going to pray anymore. You're not answering me. You're not listening. I don't know. I don't have any words left. I'm not going to pray. And, 10 minutes, something would happen. And I would say, oh, Lord. Yeah, and I go, oh, I wasn't going to pray. But I always came back to that spot where, but I will trust you. And just giving yourself to that choice, no matter what it looks like, no matter how dark it is, no matter if you can't see what it looks like, even in your imagination, sometimes it's gone, that far gone. Just going back to that, okay, but I can trust God. Even in this transition, even in this dark cave, even in this horrible spot life has me, even in the pressing, I will just trust God. And that's the biggest decision you could ever make in your life.
The title of this episode is called Trusting Without Evidence. How do you keep trusting without evidence? How do you do it?
It's a decision. And it's not easy. But if you think of the scripture of faith is the evidence of things not seen, we try to say that faith gets us what we see, but that's not true. Faith, the unseen, is the evidence. And so I'd have to draw that parallel to trust. We don't have to trust God when everything's going good, or we think. We tend to not trust him with our soul, with our emotions, with our tears, with our lives, because we got it. It's all, we got it. But when the second things go sideways and now we don't know, oh no, I don't know what's going on. I can't see. This feels bad. This is overwhelming. I'm disappointed with God. That's where a lot of people walk away, when they can't see. But in that moment where you can't see, that's where you close your eyes and don't look, and only look to him. And let him be that guide. Let him be that guiding light, and let him lead you into whatever he has planned. Because if he makes a promise, he's going to bring it to pass. I am sure that Joseph thought that when he was sitting in the prison all those years. He had the vision, two dreams, and sitting in that prison the second time around, falsely accused. I know he couldn't see how that was going to happen. But we know he continued to trust God when he couldn't see. And there's a desperation that's almost holy in that moment. When you literally can't do it yourself, maybe you can't even believe it yourself, maybe you can't even look at it yourself, but you just have to go, you know what? I'm going to trust God. No matter what I see, I know that God is God. And that's one of the things I had to do too early on, is when I didn't know anything, I would just sit down and go, okay, God, let's just go back to the basics. I know you're there. I can't not believe you're there. I know I'm saved. I can't not believe in the cross. Let's just start there. And I literally shucks down my faith teaching back down to those two basics many times and say, God, I cannot see what you're doing right now. I cannot feel anything. I'm pressed with life. Life is being sucked out of me. I can't see what you're doing, what you want to do, what you maybe even have done in the past. Right now, all I know is you're there. And I know I'm saved. I know there's a cross. And that's all I can do. And sometimes you got to go back to those basics. And as painful as it is, and as simple as it sounds, there's a power in that moment when you just go, I know you're there. And sometimes it's okay. It's okay for that to be the only thing you know, when you have no evidence before your face.
When was that moment when you stopped mourning over the original path and started embracing the one God had chosen for you to do now?
Probably when I saw the map and realized he had done it. It didn't look like I thought. And I realized he had done it, and that broke something inside of me to realize that he had done what he said in spite of the situations I'm still living in. I'm still taking care of my son. I'm missing a little lot of life stuff, right? And to realize that he had done what he said, I was like, oh, it just put this confidence in me that if he can do that without me even knowing, me even catching on. It was like the Christmas surprise your parents gave you when you were a kid. How did you pull that off? It's that kind of same element there. That totally restored that trust that I thought had been broken, that I had confessed and said, I'm still going to trust you. I'm still going to trust you. And that restored that broken part of me to realize he had done what he promised. In spite of me, I didn't know. I was just trying to make money. I was just trying to make a living. I was not trying to fulfill the call. I was leaving that on him. And so that, in that moment, and I had no idea from there how far this thing was going to go and how much was going to be done in the next, what's it been, maybe 10 years since then. I had no idea. That was enough. He had done what he said. And so I didn't have to press anymore. And yet he still continued to unfold, even though I was like, oh, we're done. We did what you said. I'm good. This is awesome. I had no idea you were going to do that. And then he still continued to unfold until I'm looking at expansions now that I literally have to trust him for every single day because he just kept doing and kept going.
Your story reminds me of something that I've learned myself. Years ago, I had felt like I was at the bottom of the barrel. And looking back now, I realized I wasn't at the bottom of the barrel. I was standing at the top of the next level. Yes. I just couldn't see it. Just like you're talking about. When you're going through it, you just don't see it. But then you realize how faithful God is through all of this. The scripture tells us that grace and mercy follow us all the days of our life. And it's like grace and mercy is what's carrying us through all of this.
Yes.
Was there ever a moment where you realized what felt like an ending was actually God positioning you?
I would have to say probably when I first brought Chris home and realized I'm stuck here forever. That felt like an ending. And looking back, I could say that was a positioning. And then over the years, as things unfolded, there's been, I don't know that, I really thought that was the ending. I thought he had done what he said. I was off the hook. We'd accomplished our goal. Thank you, God. This is beautiful. And so I didn't know there was so much more to come. I had no idea how far that was going to go. And for several years from there really wasn't a lot. A little Bible study here, then we had to wait for the internet to develop a little bit more too, before we had Zoom and WhatsApp now. And we did have Skype. That's how I taught classes. But I was good. He had done it. End of story, I thought. That was really cool trick, God. But then he's like, oh no, we still got a whole other thing to go. Come on. So that I think maybe in that moment, I thought that was it. He had done it. And he made good on his promise. And so I thought I was done.
Share with us everything that's going on right now with you. What's happening?
Oh, my goodness.
What is the fulfillment? What is this promise? What's going on?
It is amazing. I had somebody contact me from Pakistan, sent me an email. This has been about 3 years ago. And he said, would you teach in our school, the Christian Institute, New Life Christian Institute in Karachi, Pakistan? And I said, yeah, because to me, that's part of the vision, right? I'm going to the nations, it's Pakistan, this is amazing. So I started doing some video teachings with him by way of Zoom. And then he sent me a letter. He goes, you wrote books? I said, yes. He goes, well, let me translate them and we'll publish them in Pakistan. And there's so much of, who are you? I don't know you. I don't trust you. You're a person. I don't even know who you are. And so there was a lot of trust issues. But I was like, well, I don't want to miss God if this is something God is doing. So I'd rather make a mistake trying to do trying to follow God than to sit at home and not do anything because I didn't know. So I'm like, I'm going to step out. So we started with, I don't remember I think we did James first. I think we did James, we did John. Then we got to the leadership book and we began printing them. And so we print 500 at a time because that's all I can afford at any one time. Now, there have been a lot of people who've given along the way, and that has helped a lot. So I have not carried that all financially myself. But the books were really just the beginning of a whole new story. I thought, this is great. This is fun. I like this. So we began distributing them into his region. And then the man I mentioned before, Javed, learned of the leadership book, and he said, I want them for some Indian pastors. And I'm like, okay, that was great because I actually had a dream about the Indian pastors, and I was in the dream, an angel or some person, big person was standing next to me, and he says, if we don't feed them, they're going to die. And so I started looking for Indian pastors everywhere. And then Javed said, I want you to do a leadership conference with the Indian pastors. And I'm like, oh, okay, that was my dream. I'm going to do that. I know that. And it just began to unfold. We have printed around 14,000 copies of the different books. All the different books are right at 13,000. But now, just this year, at the beginning of this year, I was like, okay, God, I need your direction. And he was like, get ready to expand. And I'm like, no. I'm not even handling what you're putting on my plate right now. And each decision takes such discernment and such prayer to not get tricked into something. But now I'm working with, so we've got the distribution center set up. Brother Marcus is doing so wonderful, and he translates my books, and we distribute out of Karachi. I've gone as far as the Indian border now to work with the Indian pastors that have converted from Hinduism. And I did the second conference with them, leadership conference with them this year, but we did 2 sessions because they said 1 session last year was too short. So that's kind of a yearly thing. Now I've connected with a pastor in another region, and just this last week, I'm going tomorrow to a whole new region up in the northern region of Pakistan. And I'm teaching for a youth service tomorrow. It's night for them and morning for me, and it has just expanded until now. I'm having to go, I'm not teaching any this week. But I got a call today, and of course I'm teaching again Monday. But it's just, I'm teaching 1 to 2 times a week. And then the secondary thing to the leadership book is we just did a leadership conference about 2 weeks ago, and they wanted to do the leadership conference. I'll teach and then pass out the leadership books to all the pastors that are there. And so the problem, and that's not in a negative, is that now the pastors that were at that leadership conference is like, okay, now you can come do this at my church. And I'm thinking, whoa, I don't even know what to do with this. So it's just expanding way beyond what I could have even thought and way beyond what I can even manage. And it's looking like we may end up with a couple of distribution centers. We need a team, really, at this point, if we want to do more. But I go back to what I said, a phrase I said earlier. I said, this is your baby, God. And so sometimes funds would not be there to print the books, and you've got people asking for them, and we can't print them. We can't get them out, and I don't worry about it. I just sit back and go, God, this is your baby. If you feed it, it lives. If you don't, it dies. I mean, it's all on you. I don't have to work harder, go try to get a 3rd or 4th job. This is your baby, and every time God has come through, and it's been slow this year, but at the same time, I've started doing so much more as far as the teaching, ministering to pastors, ministering to different churches, and really fellowshipping with them. It's just blowing my mind. So all of that's going on there. And plus I have stuff here that I'm doing now too. So it's just beyond what I could have ever imagined.
How can anybody reach out to you, contact you, help you financially? I'm on Facebook, and I have all of, I have Cash App, Venmo, Zelle, PayPal. I also have Buy Me a Coffee. That's an easy way to give. That's pretty international too. And so I have all of those, and all of those are on my Facebook page.
And I also have a new website, devstarministries.com. They can reach out to the DevStar Ministry website too. So I just got that up last night, actually. So
as I'm sitting here just listening to your story, I'm reminded that God's promises don't always arrive in the packages that we expect.
Right.
Sometimes God fulfills promises in ways we never would have imagined. Not through doors we expected, but through the only ones He can open. And
yes.
Perhaps this episode will remind us that just because we cannot see the fulfillment does not mean that God has forgotten the promise. Because sometimes those promises come through hidden seasons, they come through heartbreak, they come through caregiving, they come through doors we never would have chosen. But what stands out to me through this whole story is while the method changed, the mission never did.
Never did.
God remained faithful. And I think that's the encouragement for all of us, for every listener. Just because we cannot see what God is doing doesn't mean He has stopped working. Just because the promise doesn't look the way that we've imagined doesn't mean the promise is gone. Sometimes what feels like a detour becomes the very road that God uses to fulfill what He spoke in the first place. And that's why this episode matters to me, because trust without evidence isn't trusting after you already have seen the answer. It's trusting while you're still waiting for that answer. So, wow. Thank you.
Amen.
Thank you for sharing your story. And before we close, many of our listeners, I am sure, may be finding themselves somewhere in the middle chapter of their story. Maybe they're carrying a promise. Maybe they're walking through a hidden season. Maybe they're struggling to trust without evidence. Would you just take a moment and pray before we go?
Yes. Father God, we just come before you right now, God, and I bring every broken heart, every busted dream, every person that feels closed in, every disappointment, every person who's disappointed because you didn't come when they thought. God, you know these thoughts that we have. You know these emotions we have. And you know why we have these emotions, God, so many times is because we thought you were going to do something a certain way, and it didn't turn out that way. But help us remember that you will always do what you said, and that wait. Help us in that wait. We're not good at waiting, God. We're not good. Especially when we know what you said, and we're pursuing your heart, and we're pursuing your passion, and we're pursuing the ministry, and we're pursuing what the promises that you gave us, and then we can't see. There's so much frustration there, God. And I thank you, first off, that you understand that frustration. And I think you smile a little bit because you go, just wait. I got this. I got you. So today, God, remind us that you watch over your word to perform it. And that's not just the words we read out of your written word. That's that rhema word that you spoke in our heart. It's that vision you spoke through a prophetic utterance when we were in a service, when we were a child. You watch over your word, and your word never returns to you without doing what you purposed it to do. So help us get our eyes off of ourselves, even though we've got to take care of these broken hearts as this crucible of life crushes that fragrance out of us that we didn't even know was there. And help us just learn to trust you no matter what we see. Help us remember to just keep pursuing your heart. Help us pursue you with the same passion you pursue us. Help us remember that you don't give up on your passion for us. You are a passionate God, and you pursue your people with a passion. And so, God, I pray that you remind us that it's relationship that you're after. And in that relationship is where those dreams get fulfilled. In relationship with you is where those visions come to pass. In relationship is where we begin to see you unfold things that we couldn't have even imagined. You do things far beyond what we could imagine. That scriptures in Ephesians, and we know you really do. So help us just remember to focus on you, to believe that every word you have said will come to pass, even if it doesn't look like what we thought, even if it doesn't unfold like we thought. We just trust you. And God, I pray that every heart that is broken, every person that maybe is in that crucible of life, that you just pour your grace on them now. Remind them that your mercies are new every single morning. Your grace won't run out. You don't get as impatient with us as we get with you. Thank you for being patient with us. Thank you for waiting on us while we learn to wait on you. And thank you that we know you will not abandon us. You will not leave us. And you won't change your mind. You will do what you say. And so we say we trust you to do what you say today. Thank you so much, God, just for being who you are in our lives. Amen.
Moving in our midst, I worship you, I worship you. You are here, working in this place. I worship you, I worship you. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness, my God, that is who you are. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness, my God, that is who you are.
You are here, touching every heart. I worship you, I worship you. You are here, you're turning lives around. I worship you, oh, I worship you.
Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness, my God, that is who you are. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness, my God, that is who you are. 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 Even when I can see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop working. Even when I can't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop